So Beth is sitting up there. Can we move over so I'm not? We're playing musical chairs.
Wow, you guys are better than my classes in terms of becoming quiet and ready. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, everyone, it's so great to see everyone here today. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Dr. Hugh Long. I'm the Associate Professor of Drama and English at Athens State University, and I'm fortunate to be able to teach at this wonderful building called the Alabama Center for the Arts. And I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, especially for this amazing presentation we're having called Beautiful Monster, A Comedy, an evening with author Miles Borrero. First, allow me to introduce our amazing guest this evening, Miles Borrero. Miles is an internationally renowned yogi, actor, musician, equestrian, nanny, and author who is graciously here tonight to speak about his memoir, Beautiful Monster of a Comedy. Beautiful Monster, if you don't know, is described as a breathtaking, exquisitely crafted memoir about a trans person's singular journey through breaching the boundaries of gender across generations, cultures, and borders to become his truest, most authentic self. Now a senior yogi who leads retreats all over the world, Miles works to dismantle the systems within ourselves that keep us small. He lives in New York with his sweetheart and 2 adorable dogs. Love that. I also want to welcome 2 other guests we have here this evening. Let me introduce to you to Beth Noblit. Beth over here is the founder and president of the Southeastern Diversity Project, a nonprofit founded in 2020 by a small group of friends who wanted to create a safe and affirming space for any historically marginalized groups while bringing our community members together through education, acceptance, and advocacy programs. Beth is also an accountant who specializes in personal tax and debt resolution. She's married to her college roommate Emily, with whom she shares a beautiful, gifted, and loving daughter and equally awesome son-in-law. Big round of applause for Beth. And my very good friend Caroline Duncan, who is an independent artist and author and just an amazing, creative human being. Is a native of Decatur. Caroline graduated with honors from the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa and studied at the prestigious Michael Howard Studios in New York. I'm supposed to say War Eagle then? I'm kidding. Roll Tide, I like that. No, I'm not I don't know, I'm at Athens State. Okay. And Auburn never took me, and I never applied at Alabama. So, but Caroline here graduated, studied at the prestigious Michael Howard Studios in New York with Larry Singer before moving to Los Angeles. And since 2004, she has filmed more than 80 national commercials and print ads in addition to her television and film credits. Caroline is a professional visual artist and teaches painting as well. So if we give a very round of applause for all of them. I am so excited because I absolutely adored your book, Miles. And I just want to give you a moment here to speak first about this before we start tackling all these questions and asking things of you. Please tell us a little about your process in this book and what it took you to take this journey to share with all of us.
Sure. I think you had an announcement.
I do have just one little announcement. So we're all here together in this room as a big family of love, and we do have someone here who's neurodivergent with Tourette's. So everybody, just keep your hearts open. If you hear any spiritual sounds escaping, just enjoy them, and let's all be friendly and kind together.
Roll Tide.
That's right, roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Thanks, Hugh. You wanted to know about my process?
Yes.
In writing it?
Yes. Which is this place here now.
Sure. I used to, as a yoga teacher, I found that it was difficult for people to grasp the philosophical aspects of yoga. And I had come from an acting background, and I wasn't currently acting in my life anymore. And I felt, I've always enjoyed all the arts, and I wanted to have an outlet for expression. So I started a blog. This must have been like 17 or 18 years ago, and I kept it for 12 years where I wrote once a month. I would write a little essay about something that I was thinking about within that was happening in my life and how I related it to the yoga philosophy. And some of the essays were funny, some of the essays were just, whatever was happening, some of them were more serious depending on what was going on with my life, because it spanned 12 years, which is a long time. And at some point my students started saying that they really enjoyed what I was writing, and the idea of, creating something more out of it arose. And at first I thought I maybe would compile some of those essays and complete that and turn it into a little book of how yogic philosophy meets life. And then I realized that the story that needed to be told was a different story, and so I started writing my memoir, and it ended up absorbing a few of those essays in the process, but I realized that at the time that I started writing it, which was 6 years ago, a little bit more than that maybe now, that there was a really big gap in education about trans people, and there was a lot of information that we didn't have, that even I didn't have. And so I kept getting a lot of questions from my students as I was moving through my life, and I figured that I didn't want to write something didactic, because that's just not that interesting to me. Even though I'm a teacher, I've always been a lover of stories. So that was really where I wanted to dive into the story and try to tell the story in the most beautiful, artful way possible. But of course, I think any queer person or trans person or any marginalized person in a marginalized community understands that part of, whether fortunately or unfortunately, part of our sort of task of being alive is to continue to educate, and so that's baked into the book, but I really wanted it to be a literary work, a work of storytelling. So that's what I focused my energy on, and it just it started telling itself, and then it continued, and then one day it was done.
Well, I love the way it told itself in terms of when I was reading it, I'm feeling this sort of stream of consciousness from you. I was chuckling earlier that I only talked to you for the first time yesterday, but I've been hearing your voice in my head for a while now. And I love that aspect of how you chose to write your memoir, that it's this sort of surrealist approach with a stream of consciousness that was I was taking from it. I was wondering in terms of its non-linear structure, and yet it is linear too, because where we sort of end up is, I feel like I want more, but I know life needs to continue, and I can't wait for the next chapters that come out in the future, hopefully. But I was wondering, what was your conscious decision to go into that sort of stream of consciousness with your writing? As I said, I was feeling a bit of surrealism in there. Are there perhaps other writers that you took inspiration from? I was just curious.
Yeah, I was raised in Bogota, Colombia. So I was raised inside of a magical, realistic culture. If you've ever been to Colombia, I was actually, a friend of mine the other day they moved down to Colombia, her and her partner, and she had read my book, and she said, it's funny because magical realism here is just realism. Because I come from a culture that is very, we just have that in our DNA. So the way that we tell stories, the way that we experience the world is very, we're very emotional and heightened emotional, and so we have very rich, passionate experiences. And so I feel like that was kind of just baked into who I am. And the other part of that is that I've always had this strange relationship with time. And so I wanted it to feel fairly fluid. And I wanted the reader to be able to almost like be in my shoes for the journey, because I felt that oftentimes the conversation in regards to the trans community lacks nuance, and I felt that if people could travel with me as I learned things, because oftentimes I think in the media, the talk of trans people is that we have an agenda, that we know where we're going and what we've done, and that we know a lot. And I think really the opposite is quite true. We know nothing. I mean, I think as people, maybe, I feel like the older I get, the less I know. But we know nothing, and we go discovering little nuggets along the way, and becomes our story, you know. So I wanted to offer the reader an opportunity to maybe experience the highs and lows of the journey, so that maybe it would call in their life their highs and lows, and speak to the places where we overlap, because my journey is much like your journey. It's a human journey of love and grief and loss and joy and exuberance and laughter, and it has all of the things that a life holds. So I felt like that was a way that I could conjure you into my life, and maybe ask you to drop whatever preconceived notions existed and have the journey, and then see what was left at the end.
Well, you definitely take us on that journey. That was the beautiful thing about it. I was asking, I think, what I was seeing, I think this comes from your Latin heritage. A lot of your writing reminded me of Federico Garcia Lorca and some of his sort of qualities and dreams and your imagery that you were utilizing. And I love being taken on that journey with you. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
I actually wanted to read it in Spanish, to be honest. I was getting excited because I thought the language would be so lyrical, especially for how you're writing. I thought that was wonderful.
My mom is a translator, so there's a possibility that could happen.
Great. I also, one aspect of your work that I walked away with after reading Beautiful Monster was this concept of being seen and of connecting it to breath. Those are two aspects that really stood out to me, and I was wondering, what are your thoughts on those two recurring concepts that I was seeing? I don't know if, I believe it's intentional on your part, that this whole notion of being seen, this need to be seen, and how do you see them as integral, both being seen and breathing as part of your story of becoming?
That's an amazing question. I love it. When we get stressed, our nervous systems shut down, and the way that that expresses itself is that we go into fight or flight mode, and when we're in fight or flight mode, our brain literally narrows our ability for anything that's extra. So it narrows our ability for creativity, it narrows our ability for joy, it narrows, it will even confuse a smile with an aggressive gesture. And that comes to your question, because breathing is the way to unlock those, when the nervous system gets stressed, the breath stops. And breathing is the way to unlock back into more of a rest and digest state, which is where we experience the most sort of abundance. And because I know that as a yoga teacher, I've always experienced that, you know, if I'm breathing up here, it'll encourage you to breathe. But if I stop breathing, everybody here is going to stop breathing, because you feel it, you know? And so my sense was that the breath was a key element to the story, because I kind of coach you without letting you know. It's kind of, the yoga book is kind of like a surreptitious yoga lesson, you know, like throughout the book, I use this Tibetan phrase for the breath, soham, which means I am that. The Tibetans have translated it to mean I am that. And so it's kind of a cue for the reader to drop in, you know, for all of us, for me as a writer, you know, even though I'm not actually actively writing it as you're reading it, I feel like it's a way for us to just drop in together. And that gives us the opportunity to start anew. Beginners, to start like as a brand new beginner every time. And maybe it also offers the space for, you know, if either of us is going into fight or flight, it kind of asks us to consider not doing that. And so I love that you noticed that, and that's something that sort of rises to the surface from the book, because that was something that was very mindful, and it was something that was purposeful. And when I read the book out loud for the audio, I really wanted the breath to be alive. I didn't want them to cut it or trim it or change it in any way. You know, that you could hear the reader, me, breathing. again, because we're animals, you know, and so if I have a sense of relaxation about me, it's going to invite that in you, and I feel like that's always just a better place to start. Whatever, you know.
Oh yes, and you do create that. We have those moments while reading along. I know I have my moments of pausing, and it's just always nice to have that chance to catch your breath. I mean, I think that's something we learn in the theater world. As you know, one of the things as an actor, once you get on stage, you have to breathe. And you have to connect to your breath, otherwise you will stop. And I won't let that happen in class again. You keep breathing. Excellent. I also noticed I walked away with the concept as well of the value of the family chosen. I thought that was a fascinating phrase you used, and I was just wondering if you could speak further on this concept and how the family you've chosen has supported you artistically.
I'm going to cry, but I'm Latin, so it's okay, I'm not suffering. Sorry, but part of my chosen family is up here.
I know.
And so it's I think as queer people, oftentimes when we're trying to figure out really important things, the things that matter to all people, love, spirituality, family, we're met with really intense emotions and oftentimes very negative reactions from the world, from our families. So we learn early on that we have to create safety with people who maybe are not blood, but might understand some aspects of who we are. And oftentimes, I think because there's such a big journey of such a big growth and learning, our partners, our girlfriends, boyfriends, partners in general, they maybe aren't there for that long because we're both struggling to stay alive and to just survive, that maybe things don't work out in the end, but that doesn't mean that they're not people of the heart and valuable to keep around. And we've walked very trying parts of the journey with each of those people. So I think that we're more propense to keep those people in our lives and not just throw them away because things didn't work out, you know. And so I think that chosen family is one of the greatest gifts, you know, and it's in this country currently, it's a way that queer people and trans people can exist, and it's within these bubbles of safety that we can at least start to find our lives and start to find our ways. So it's something that's very important to me, you know. I mean, my own family is also very important to me. And my chosen family has just been my rock throughout this whole process.
Caroline, you want to speak on that as being part of the family chosen?
Can I try not to? The Miles Prize. The Miles Prize. I'm usually. It's just an automatic response. I think the idea of chosen family is really, really important because it doesn't have the same limitations of the culture maybe where you come from. It is truly a lifeboat for queer people and for people who are living outside of what the norm is. I mean, we experience a degree of risk in our daily lives that the populace at large, I don't know what else it sounds good, the air quotes populace at large does not experience. So it creates a texture and allows us to lodge ourselves in a place of belonging that is really, really important and gives you the kind of flexibility to continue to select who you are in the world out of the options that are most appropriate to you. And even if you come from a family of, deep love, like I come from a family that absolutely adores me, and I adore them, and, beyond that, I had to continue in the world to find a group that was, that could see me, a place where I could find myself, because I was going against my culture. So the chosen family for queer people is extraordinarily important. It is actually a life-giving and life-saving thing. And the idea of belonging in general is so important, because particularly for the trans community, there is so little safety in the ideas of the world about them, in the laws, that it's so important that, the world continues to open their heart for this belonging to occur. So sorry, I went a little off topic there.
Pass it over to Beth.
Yes.
I want to hear Beth
There you
about
go,
this
Beth.
too.
Oh, my thoughts on
The family
our
chosen.
chosen families are, I think that they're crucial for our existence. We have to have those because so many times we don't. And even when we do have family that are not part of the queer community, we sometimes don't feel that they see us, no matter how hard they try. So it's no fault of their own sometimes. They can love us to pieces, but when we are different or perceive ourselves differently, or they perceive us differently, we have a hard time with that fitting in. That's one reason we chose the book. It's one reason why SCP exists, is because we don't get a chance to make those families if we don't have the ability to make those connections. We have to be able to have places in our communities where we can find each other, because too often, because we don't know people, we stay stuck in the house. So, Miles, I think that sharing your book and just having it out there, somebody is going to not be here tonight and read that book, and it's just going to make it possible for them to come to something that SCP is hosting, just to find people to connect. So thank you for that, and thank you for being here.
And that's kind of like, that's one of the things I connected with was the family chosen, especially when reading about your decision to come to America, leaving behind Columbia, specifically to study theater. And I find a connection, not always in a theater professor, and this is where my family chosen has always come into theater, and that was where I first felt accepted and I belonged. So I want to ask you a little more, is why in your youth did you seek out the theater? And what led you all the way to here? And that is quite a walk to Utah, of course.
In retrospect, the answer is that I don't think I would have been able to become myself staying home. But the actual theater as a thing, I was horseback riding at a very, I was competing, and I was sort of at a very high level. And the world of horseback riding is a tough world. It's very competitive. It's there's a lot that goes into, bless you. Sometimes there's all sorts of, when people want to win, they mistreat the animals, and and I had been riding every day pretty much since I was 4 years old, and had come to a crossroads where I think I wanted to do something different and be in a different world, and it seemed like theater people were rad, and I was like, this seems like a place where a bunch of weirdos congregate, and I thought that seemed cool, and I didn't know anything about it really, because there was some theater in my high school, and I really tried participating in it, but I never really quite got cast. I was always in the band, and that always seemed just sad, But then I decided to audition for an acting program in Utah. The University of Utah had a really good program at the time. So I auditioned, but it was terrifying because I didn't even know what an audition was. And I basically found these 2 books in the library, and I auditioned with a piece from No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre, where I played like a 40-year-old. And then I auditioned with a Chekhov play, and I mispronounced the title, and I was so terrified that I literally just memorized the thing. And then when my dad hit record, I just spewed the whole thing right out. There was no punctuation, there was nothing. It was just like full blown, like, let's go, you know? But the head of the program, for some reason, I guess took pity on me and was like, this kid needs help. Like, they really don't know anything about the theater. This is a student leader, you know, so they brought me up there. And yeah, and then it was a great fit for me because, as you say, theater people are very welcoming and they're weird and freaky, and you know, it was a good match, you know.
Fantastic. So I was wondering about that because obviously there was like a jump from the equestrian and everything going on in Columbia. All of a sudden you're in Utah doing theater. I'm like, whoa, what happened here? But with the non-linear structure, it worked really well for me in terms of following along the story with you. So another question I had though was, it's a two-part question. What part of Beautiful Monster did you have the most challenging time writing? And then conversely, what section was the most fun for you to share and write about?
I loved all of it. I loved all of it. If you have never sat down to write about yourself, it's an amazing gift for you. I think it elucidates so many things. For me, I just learned so much about my past because I began my transition at 40. So that's a long life lived of confusing instances. And I think when I started looking back, it's not that, I mean, when you look at your story and you create a story, you sometimes get stuck there too, right? But I looked back and my thought was, I was just kind of piecing together some of the breadcrumbs with a lot of, like I felt very protective and very generous about how it goes together, and also not married to how they came together. I was kind of like, okay, tell me where you want to go. So it didn't feel actually difficult to write it. There was a crucial point where there was a really good draft, and then that draft jumped in time, but there were some holes in the draft, so then we had to go back. I say we because my partner Sarah basically edited the whole book. So we had to go back, and then I went back and wrote it and sort of reorganized chronologically. And then some of the moments became fuller, and the moments that wanted to really live in the book became strong.
Right.
But then I didn't love the whole idea of going linearly because I felt like it was important for you to hear my voice right away as an adult, so that you knew that I was smart, capable, and well about my wits. But I did want to jump back and forth in time. So then the toughest part was going back and finding where to start, where to end, and what on earth happens in between. You know, all of those things, and how to kind of move timing wise without confusing the reader, without leaving them sort of in the dust. And that kind of, it was hard. I didn't dislike it. It was just very challenging. And we had all these Post-it notes, these giant Post-it notes stuck on my apartment wall, trying to figure out how to, and we'd organize something and then it would be wrong. It just wouldn't feel right, so we'd have to go back and kind of retrace our steps. But I kind of loved it. It was a treasure hunt. And ultimately, once all of the things were in there, I was kind of like, okay, darling, you tell me what you are, it's like, there's me, and there's my story, and there's the book, and there was a conference between all of them, but it wasn't like, my will wasn't really, the book, I kept asking it, where do you want to go, what are you, and that's how the story started to piece itself.
I think I want to ask Caroline then, what was it like for you, though, knowing Miles and reading this journey and having been family chosen? And so you have an idea of this process and what's going on. What was it, your experience that you took from it?
Well, I will tell you that I'm not a fortune teller, but I knew that Miles was going to be a writer and that this would be the first of many books. And I told him when we were together, I was like, you're going to write a book. I was like, you're going to write a lot of books, I know you are. So seeing the book, seeing him begin the journey of telling the story, it was a perfect melding of so many different elements about a person. And many of you who are in the audience, if you haven't sat down to write anything about yourself, and I know that many of you may be writers and you don't know it yet. Like my dad, for instance, who's right here in the audience, is a very, very good writer, and I'm hoping that at some point he'll write a book. But the book starts to describe you to yourself. That's what I saw happen with Miles. So I saw the best of him come together. All these different pieces, like presents which is what I think our life is. We're collecting presents that we've sent from ourselves, little hints about who we're supposed to be next. And I recommend all of you, if you haven't listened to the audiobook, that's a really, really special treat because Miles is a wonderful speaker and storyteller, and there's a lot of texture in hearing someone speak their own words. So it was a trip, but not at all unexpected, seeing the way it went down. It's a little weird to like read yourself on a page because I'm in the book, but Miles is extremely generous.
That's great.
Beth, did you want to talk about your experience in terms of your reception of the book?
I can tell you my favorite part and ask Miles what he thought about it. I used to be a PE teacher in a past life. So when you walk in and you see the kid with the skateboard and you identify with the child and you see yourself in another human being, how powerful that is. And as far as in our book club, that was my meltdown moment to be in front of, well, not strangers, they're all my friends, we've come to know each other quite well, but there's just something about a human being recognizing themselves in another human being. How did you feel with this kid? Was it really that moment for you? Because Kindle and the hard copy and Audible, been through them all multiple times and in love with them. It was, it felt very powerful on paper and it felt very powerful hearing you say that. How did you feel about that kid? And is that kid just still living in your head? And
Yes, that kid, that moment was that moment, truly, and I think it was cushioned by the fact that the kid's mom, so for those of you who haven't read the book, we're talking about when I nannied a 6-year-old in New York City from an Israeli family who basically took me in and became an adoptive family in some ways, and I didn't necessarily want to take care of kids, but because I was from Colombia, I didn't have work papers, so one of the ways that I could stay, I had 1 year to stay after college to work, but the visa only allowed me to work in theater, but I had to stay afloat somehow, so these people took me in and basically I took care of their child, and but it was kind of like the last resource for me. I was kind of like, I don't really know if I'm right for taking care of kids, but a friend of mine was leaving that job. And she basically forced my hand. She was like, you have to go to this interview. They're waiting for you at 5 o'clock on Wednesday. And I was new to New York City. I got on the wrong train. I was a half hour late. The whole thing was embarrassing. I was thinking these people are never going to want me to take care of their child. I can't even arrive on time. And I think the moment, it was magic because it was the scene and the mom was the witness. So it wasn't just the seeing of myself represented so clearly, also by a 6-year-old. It was shown up hardcore by a 6-year-old. You know what I mean? Like you get somewhere and you're 24 and then all of a sudden the 6-year-old just like pulls the mat from under you. Just by the purity of who they are. There's nothing had been spoken, bless you, nothing had been spoken, nothing had been, there had been no communication, you know what I mean? And just by their presence, it was so disarming. But the thing that made it magic was that the mom knew that they needed it as much as I did. That their child also needed to feel seen. And so perhaps, I imagine, in that moment they were seeing themselves too. You know, and I think that the magic of the mom realizing that. And she had this wild, amazing, like, bun in her hair full of pencils. This is incredible, like, and this beautiful smile with slightly crooked teeth, like, she's just like a light, Debbie, the mom. And even though I was late and all these things, like, she saw this thing go down, and she was like, can you start tomorrow? And I really needed somebody to throw me a bone, you know, both financially, and I guess I didn't know that I needed this, but I also needed that moment of just being seen. But I think she was the completing circle in that, you know, because that role of the witness, that oftentimes in yoga and meditation we talk about the witness, which is this part of yourself that's able to both be immersed. It's kind of the place where your material self meets your spiritual self. And there's almost like well, they call it the witness, right? Because there's a feeling that you can kind of see yourself. But it's not an out-of-body experience like I left my body. It's an inner body experience where you're still inside and seeing yourself. And I think Debbie gave us both the greatest gift, you know? Yeah.
I have to agree that was a very moving part for me as well. I loved it. In fact, I wanted more. I want to hear more about your stories of being in it, you know, what that was like. And I love that you brought back being seen again. If I could encourage you on your second novel, that might be a good tale to talk about.
Cool.
It's pretty amazing. I wanted more. Yeah. I guess another question I have is, what is one thing that you learned? Oh, not one thing, there's probably more than that. One thing that maybe you've now reinvented about yourself since writing this, because your journey is continuing. The book leaves off at one part of your journey, and there's been so much more since then. And what has now changed since the publication of this for you?
A lot has changed. I have learned that it was terrifying to write about people that I love, because I love them, and I really tried writing with a lot of love. I really tried focusing the story on me, focusing the story on the things that we didn't know, not our mistakes, and also focusing the story on the fact that even if there were mistakes and things went awry, that the love way overpowered the difficulty. And you don't know, you know, when you put a piece of art into the world, how people will take it, how it will be received, and if those people are in that piece of art, well then that's also, you know, an interesting, it's kind of, you just have no idea. It's like setting off a bomb sometimes, you know.
Bomb!
In some ways. And so I wasn't sure what was going to happen, and I've learned that some people that I thought wouldn't be able to have met me in an astonishing way, and our relationships have just moved to the next level in a love place that's just incredible. And I have also learned that there are people that where it triggered them in a way where they didn't like what was said or what was expressed, and that has caused maybe a turning point in our relationship. And what I'll say about that is that even though it hurts, I feel okay about it, because when I look at the book and when I feel what's in there, I really do feel that I came from the biggest place of love that I knew at the time. And if people weren't able to, or can't meet me or hear that right now, or can't even come to the table and talk about it with me, then that's okay. You know, like sometimes time changes that. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just means a fork in the road. And but I'm 46 years old, and I just am at a point in my life where I cannot live any smaller than I am any longer. You know, like it is just not possible. It's not sustainable. I would rather die than do that. So at this point, if they can't see how important the writing of this book was for me, and how important the writing of this book is for the people out there who need it, then you know I'm okay with that. I'm okay with just stepping at least away from that for now. You know, even though of course I feel it in my bones and it's hard. Yeah, it's been a big learning curve, and I also feel like I have changed too. You know, like some of the things, like writing is amazing because it's this love letter that you put out there, but it doesn't change with you. It's not like the words keep changing as you keep changing. So already there are things that that I'm like, oh, that's kind of, I would have said that differently, or you know, and that's okay too. I mean, I think part of being an artist is that art happens in a moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Well, like we described earlier, we talked about the conversation between yourself, the story, and the writing process and the organization, that there is sort of this creation that's occurring. Roland Barthes would call it the death of the author when he wrote a seminal piece about how as soon as the writing is created, the author dies. It's now about the perception of the audience and how it affects others and how we receive it. And I think the best conversation I had was I loved that talked about you not being small and refusing to be small, was a conversation you had with your sister about it was your journey and how sometimes people get too hung up on their own individual feelings about it without exceeding what the other person is going through and respecting and empathizing with their experiences. Which led me to one other question I have for you before I turn over to my guests to ask questions and talk about more about their reflections on this wonderful piece. Do you have your father's bread recipes?
Oh my gosh. I'd have to ask my mom. His recipes are scattered all over the place. Like, I mean, he used to write them on the backs of receipts. But he had a cooking group for like 10 years, where he and his buddies would hang out Thursday nights, and they'd decide. One of them was Top Chef, and he would decide whatever the menu was, and then everybody else would sous chef, which means they just sit around and drink wine and basically like tease each other. But he became the bread maker in the group, so he would always walk in with 15 loaves of bread because people couldn't just have one. You know, like everybody would take 2 loaves home, and he'd just come in with like a bag of bread. I'll have to ask my mom if she has the recipes.
I think that'd be something that STP might have to do. Just saying, bread, night, wine.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And my sister Julie probably has some of those recipes. You know, but actually, with talking about the conversation that I had with Julie, with my sister, I think that there's something. Sometimes when we love somebody so dearly, we get confused about needing to understand everything about them and loving them. And I have found that I can love better and deeper when I don't worry so much about understanding here, but when I can just be with someone. I mean, the reason why you're all wearing hearts is because this is an open-hearted conversation. And, you know, but when we meet each other from the heart place, then the understanding really doesn't matter in the end. We can just respect the fact and trust the fact that people also know themselves, you know?
So I love when you said at 40, I realized I didn't have any more F's to give.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Always fuck.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to pass this on to my friends over here.
Thank you.
Well,
I guess I'm wondering if the audience also has questions, or can we?
I was going to do that in a second.
Oh,
I'll let you guys speak.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, sorry. I don't know that I have any, Beth, do you have questions or?
Or thoughts or reflections, your
No.
experiences reading the
I
novel?
think that it was also very powerful, the idea of death and transitioning. That death, we all just, it's our dreaded thing from the time we're born, we're dying, but it also is very beautiful in the way that you write about your father and grandparents, and just this idea that time is limited that also made the transitioning better, or evident constantly, always, that we are moving through time, that we're not stationary, each and every one of us moving through time and transitioning. And our group really identified with it a lot because of thinking of it as a human story, that if we take the thought of trans people out and just think that each and every one of us are on a journey of transitioning. So how much was that for you, the element of death and transitioning, marrying with each other there?
Well, that's exactly what I was hoping for, you know, the idea of we're all constantly transitioning. We like to think that we're not, but we are. The truth is that we are. And death is so amazing, isn't it? Because it's the one thing we know is coming, and yet it never ceases to surprise.
We're all gonna die.
We are all gonna die, and it never ceases to surprise us when it happens, and it never happens at the right time, and there's also with the book was written in part during the pandemic, because I had time, and like some of us did, sitting on our couches, with my sweetheart Sarah being like, she was trailing me. I would write and she would trail me in the text, so we'd both be on our computer, and I'd be like, hey babe, sitting on the couch, and I think that with so much death around, that time was so difficult for so many, and with so many feeling and experiencing the death of their own identity in terms of you couldn't go to work, you couldn't do the things that you were used to, so all the things that sort of made us were plucked away for a time, which is a very scary place, and it's also a gift. I think death has a gift that it brings us into the liminal space where things kind of get softer between the worlds, and perhaps we are able to walk through and make changes or take decisions that we wouldn't be able to make otherwise. So I was fascinated by that idea of identity and how identity changes, and do you leave something behind, or do you carry it with you? Like, did I leave my womanhood behind because I now have 3 hairs on my upper lip, or do I is it a continuum where I can inhabit all of it? Like, I can inhabit my femininity and my masculinity, and the truth is that my femininity, for example, was so pushed on me when I was younger, because in Latin America, femininity means it is a very rigorous and small window, and it was pushed onto me so strongly that it became this really tight box. And I've actually found that I'm more comfortable with my femininity now because it's not pushed on me. So I can actually allow both the masculinity and the femininity to exist. I don't have to choose one over the other. But that journey of identity is always, I don't know, I think it's one of the most beautiful, to watch people change, to watch your partner change, over time. I imagine for parents it's very gratifying to watch their kids change, and sometimes scary too. I guess death and change are 2 things that we know come for sure.
Well, one of the things I love the most about Miles's book, and one of the things that I think makes it really important, and I hope you'll all read it if you haven't yet, is, I don't know, I wouldn't have understood the experience of a trans person had I not spent so much time with someone who's trans. And when I met Miles, that's not the way Miles was identifying, but as Miles decided, this is the direction I'm going to go, people would say, oh my God, isn't that hard? Like, are you shocked? And I felt like, no, I'm not at all, because this is the same person. And when you read the book, you will see, and I think this is a really important point, that Miles has been the same since Miles came to this planet. Like, we all come here with the seeds of our uniqueness, which I believe is our divinity too. And we all know each other in that way, like we can sense it. But Miles became more of who he is. So it wasn't like there was a huge shift. There was really just like a writing. He was course corrected into what he's meant to be. And this started from the time he was very, very small. When you read the book, I mean, you'll see that this is a person who is ripping barrettes out of his hair, along with the hair, you know, from the time he was very, very tiny, praying every single night to wake up to be a boy. So the person I knew just became more full of that selfhood. And I think that that's one of the biggest gifts that you can give to anybody that you meet, is to look at them and to take a moment to allow yourself to be affected by who they actually are. To let yourself receive that gift, and when you do that, you allow them to do that. It doesn't matter if they're straight, if they're gay, whoever they are, everyone is longing for that moment to really be taken in by someone else. And reading Miles' book, I think, it unlocks those keys no matter where you come from or what your experience is. And I think that reading the book, you know, partly because it's written in this magical realism tone, but it allows you to remember that you came here with magic. You came here from, you know, from God, from whatever it is that is the great, big, magical heart of the universe. That's in everyone. And trans people have to make a path where they constantly decide, here's where I'm going to go, here's who I am. And I feel like it's one of the most courageous things that a person can do. Because they're a sculptor that's making their own rock. I mean, they're making a path where it's like a wild jungle for them. But I think it's a great lesson of the book, is taking that moment to recognize and to be recognized in return. Because most of us are longing for that.
Can I add a little bit to that? I think people are afraid when, or parents I've noticed are afraid when their kids are non-binary or trans, that they're losing something. But I don't think they're capable of, at that point, where their fear kicks in, of understanding how much it is that they're gaining. Like, when people are okay and well and happy in their lives, they can be amazing members of society. Like, they can thrive. And when we limit those things for whatever reason, then we're really limiting their capacity to exist, and it creates quite the opposite. And I also think, see, when you were talking about, you know, God and the thing that brings us here, I'm no expert on God. I mean, I've probably been kicked out of every congregation that I could have possibly been a part of. But I have to say that I find that my journey has been a journey toward God. Like, and that might sound challenging to some of our ears, but I think it's a journey toward God because it's a journey toward choosing love. Every step along the way has been a journey toward choosing love for myself and love for the people around me, to not be, to not live sadly and like in a way that I can't, so that I become a horrible person, you know? And I think that's worth noting, you know, because even as scary as it is for changes, there's so much like the honey and the honeysuckle that you may not know yet that comes. I mean, I think everybody in this room probably has had the experience of losing a job or something, I don't know, a tree falling on your car or something where you're like, oh, that's the worst thing that's ever happened. And then you realize you never liked that car anyway. You can buy a new car that you actually like. Or you realize that your job was a job that, was really like not in your lane. And I don't know, so I guess I'm saying that just to inspire you all to embrace change.
That's good. That's actually reminds me of one of the quotes I took from your book, before I turn this over to everyone else. What I do know from my years of acting is that heartbreak, rigor, exhaustion make an excellent recipe for change, one I desperately need. I just love it. It hit me, and so I had to write it down. I love quotes. So thank you for that, Miles. I want to open this up to any questions from the audience. I'll bring the mic out to you. So does anyone have any questions for Miles or any of our panel guests that you'd like to ask today?
And I know a lot of you have not read the book. It's totally fine. You can just ask me about me, whatever.
That's okay. Yes.
Ha! I don't really have a question.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you for writing your book, because I have never seen myself represented, and I saw myself in you, and that really meant a lot.
That's great.
Take it or throw it.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comment, question, thought? Yes, please, sir.
I listened to the book, and I will say that the chants at the end were amazing. Like, if y'all don't have a chance to listen anyway, because it's really neat. It's beautiful. But what I was going to say is that the thing you said today about when people fear, they can't take anything new. Sorry, I get that way. It just makes me wonder if the political structure right now and the stuff that people watch on TV that makes them scared, if that's what's shrinking brains, shrinking the openness to look at something new and not be afraid of it. Is there a correlation there, you think?
Yeah, are you asking if there's a correlation between the shrinking brains and
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand your...
The thing about the yoga, when individually, when we're afraid that we don't have room for new things and creativity.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm thinking like in a macro way more, the fact that people watch Fox News or whatever, that they have so much fear stuff fed into them that they're not open to seeing new things, understanding people more, opening their minds to concepts that are uncomfortable because of the fear.
I think it has become exacerbated, and I think it is a nervous system thing. And when I say it's a nervous system thing, the great thing about it being your nervous system is it's not you. It's not who you are. It's an actual biological thing that happens to you, right? And I think after living through a pandemic where everybody's traumatized, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. You can't watch the world shut down in the way that we experienced it, no matter where you were living and how great you had it during the pandemic. And experience something like that without, having some major trauma. I do think that that's contributing to the way in which we're engaging with each other. And that's why I knew, once I started writing the book, the pandemic happened maybe about 8 months after I started, and I knew I had to write it because I knew that things were just going to get worse for us, because as soon as fear comes in, guess who's the first population that that gets kicked? It's us, and so I think that I guess what I'll say is that I hope that you take heart, and that as much as fear is running rampant out there, I do believe that, like here we are, you and I, right? And I believe that I can change the world one heart at a time. And so I'm working to do that. And I'm, you know, with this too, with this love letter, it's giving me a platform where I can come to, you know, invited by Athens State University to this gorgeous facility and talk to all of you. Like, it's creating these moments where I can, you know, connect with each of you. And I feel like those moments of connection erode the fear, they erode the misinformation, they erode, you know, the vitriol. And I think if we are all brave and we stand on our 2 feet and breathe with each other, I do believe that there's a way through where we can be fair with one another and respect and coexist. You know, I don't think it has to be an us or them situation. You know, yoga is all about awareness and
Yogurt.
yoga. It's all about awareness and not, you know, not othering. And so I feel like I do feel like we do that by the way that we show up with each other, by presence. You know, and I think that sometimes it's more powerful. It may be slower, and it may be, you may take time to see a change, but I do think that one heart that you can change here and there, you don't know what that heart's gonna do out there and how many hearts that heart's gonna change. You know what I mean? So I think that's sort of what I've taken on as my task, I guess, or my attempt to change what's happening, you know, so that things get a little bit better. So I hope that, you know,
Yeah, I just think that, like, before church events, in addition to praying, we all might want to breathe a little bit as a group and then have a discussion, because I didn't think about that. And we, you know, that may be a good way to start a conversation that's difficult with a group of people, is to breathe first, slowly, you know.
I think, I mean, honestly, that is one thing that will change a room. In fact, if you all sit up a little taller, bring your hands onto your hearts,
No.
and close your eyes. Feel your feet on the ground. And just touch into your breath. What I mean by that is just notice as your breath comes and goes for the next 3 breaths. And then at your own time, you can let your eyes open and just see how it is in the room now. I mean, that shifted, for me, I felt my energy shift. It would be amazing if, you know, in Congress or whatever, they could start with just taking 3 breaths. I mean, it's not voodoo, it's just 3 breaths. It's your breath, it's the thing that keeps you alive, you know? So I do think that in terms of what you're saying though, I think that if you are having, or potentially having difficult conversations, it's a great place to start. Yeah.
And I'd also say perhaps the antidote to fear is actually experience. And I think that's what I love most about Miles' book, is that it allowed me to experience a journey, a travel, a becoming. And it really was amazing for me to do that. And one thing I did take away is I need to travel more. I'm very jealous. I thought I traveled enough, but no. I have more roads to go down. But thank you for taking me some. Let me touch you.
I just wanted to ask if you had any recommendations on like further reading for people who are trying to explain the trans experience to family members who are not trans and thus have a hard time understanding it.
Yes, I do. Will you email me?
Yes.
My email is yogawithmiles. You can all email me with questions or whatever you want. Just feel like I'm a friend that you can count on if you need if you want to talk about these things. But yogawithmiles@gmail.com. And I'll send some your way. I think the book is great because when people sit with the book, they're not seeing and being told, and they're not receiving an energy, they're bringing their own energy to what they're reading, and it means that they can stop at any point and or take a break, or so it helps. I think it really helps people kind of masticate and mull over information in a different way. So I definitely think that's a great way to go if people are willing to listen or read, you know, a book. I mean, some people will listen, and listening is fine too. But I think, you know, you get a little bit more time, and you also, it's not like a conversation where you have to deal with the other person's feelings, or, you know, so it gives a little bit of space so that then people can come back to the table. But yes, email me and I'll send you some thoughts.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
No.
I have.
Wait, who's Beth?
Yes.
I'm gonna move away from the camera, so no.
No problem. You go wherever you want. Okay.
So, I don't know, I think there's a question in this. I want to thank you for the book, and we haven't had a chance to really talk about it. And I also want to thank the 3 people that are actually on stage right now, because I did something very out of character for me this year. Okay, more crying's happening. I didn't know what to expect when I read it. And we've only known each other for a very short period of time. Actually, that's not true, we've known each other for a while. But we haven't had a chance to get very close until recently. And what I didn't expect was that I looked back on my life, and after thinking that I had been quite authentic in who I am, I realized where I'd been editing myself for other people. And I didn't realize how much and how thoroughly it affected me not being truly authentic. And I loved the book, I enjoyed it so much. I thought it was very, very beautiful. What I didn't expect was that it shook me to my core. And while we were doing the book club, I was like depression inspired. I went through so many things as I did see myself in the book, and not just the trans experience, but also the New York experience, where the specific times within the journey of New York, I could very specifically see it and smell it, and like, oh yeah, I remember that. And because of the book, I was able to make that leap and actually do drag and perform, which I never thought that I would ever do, because, you know, like, get to spend a lot of time around actors and performers, and whenever we get together with other actors and performers, I'm like, feel like I'm just the nerd hanging out with the actors and performers, and now I can actually say that I am one. And I think that, I hope that this book gets into the hands of as many people as possible, because it is quite life-changing, and I want to thank you again.
Thank you. I'd like to add something to that. Thank you so much. That means so much. I think marketing a book like this is tricky, because people might look at it and say, well, what does that have to do with me? I don't know anyone who's trans. It doesn't affect me in any way. But even though I'm a trans person, this is not a trans memoir. This is a book about a human being kind of encountering this journey that you speak of authenticity. I hoped in writing it that everybody, every single person in this room, could relate to something in this book and walk away with whatever parts of yourself that you shorten or trim or fit into a box because due to fear. That's what I wanted, was to that perhaps you might like find those little moments and maybe choose a different path for yourself so that you can let go of whatever binds your life. Because I think life is hard and we all have binds, you know, it's not just trans people. So I really love, you know, I love hearing your experience, and it's a gift to hear that. And I hope that, you know, my hope was also that more, you know, that it would appeal to not just the trans and queer community, but that it would have, that other people would see themselves mirrored there in my humanity, because that's really like the thing that we all share that we can't get away from, no matter what we call each other, no matter what labels we use. That's at the bedrock of what we're all doing here, you know? Yeah, so thank you. That means the world.
So just to tag on, I don't mean to microphone, but to tell you that, you know, the book club is probably 75% non-queer people. So it definitely resonates with everyone. Your book hits home to everyone who will give it a chance.
I love that.
It's perfect.
Excellent. Well, unfortunately, our time is up for tonight here. We want to continue the conversation outside in the lobby for more discussion to come up and meet Miles. But if we could get a big round of applause for our amazing Thank you all so much for coming out this evening. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks everybody. And I'll be out in the lobby signing books, and if you want to purchase a book, come on down and say hi.